Right.
So there's your motivation right there.
Okay. Right, thank you.
Iran got his notes. Was it?
Baghdad was the head of Persia. After Istanbul, it moved over there. Yeah, they just transferred the notes over after Lawrence was unsuccessful in acquiring the notes when they broke it all up. But he was a secret agent. Yes?
Just going back to the syntax within contract and the law, if it is to change, like people like us, I suppose, if we were able to write it, and let's say most corporations out there now have got contracts and agreements, banking, house lands, everything, that are not valid. So if you were to rewrite it, is it as simple as being able to rewrite it, and then if they challenge you in court or take it to court, are you saying that you will win every time, 100% of the time, just by presenting that argument, or is it still subject to?
If you're going to rewrite it, both companies or both countries involved with going to syntax would be an agreement. Right now, we have agents here in Australia, New Zealand, Hawaii, Dubai, the United States. All over the world, we are coordinating. We have 82 countries that now have syntax, quantum, 115-page quantumized bank treaties, and they are communicating and studying to get their people and the machinery set up for all this. When the time comes, everybody's values will stay the same. The contracts will be corrected. You will not notice any difference. There will not be any big announcements to scare anybody. You never scare anybody. You fix it.
Yeah.
As long as everybody fixes it at the same time, there's no place to run unless you want to go sit on a space shuttle someplace. But otherwise, we're all on this spaceship Earth. We're all part of it. We got to work together, and everybody will be happy to fix it. This program and the things that I've said on this thing have already been broadcasted all over the world for 10 years. And so it's no secret. People know about it. They don't talk about it, but they all know about it, and they're all waiting for it to happen. So nobody's afraid. They just know it takes time to study. I mean, everyone that's been in the program has spent years studying, and they know that it's just a mountain of information to do it. I got a 30-year jump on everybody else. That's why I teach it. And they respect the fact that I'm willing to come out here and teach it to everybody. And then make tapes so that we can spread it all over the planet.
But how will that affect them? Like it's one or two or three people.
They're still going to be in charge because they know they have friends. The guy up here has 100 contacts. You don't know who the 100 contacts are. You can't step in there and talk to these people. They all trust each other. And they all have rules and regulations of cooperation. And this thing is like a big pyramid. That they got people at the top who talk to people at the bottom. It's corporate. They sit around the board of directors. They discuss things. All corporations do. When I set up the Hawaiian government, we had 22 people on the board of directors. All have equal voice in discussing how the Constitution was going to be written. I went ahead and I wrote the Constitution, and I said, here, this is your foundation to work from. Make it better. You got 22 brains working together. Make it better. And so they made certain changes along there to fit to their culture. I don't know what's in their heads. I'm not going to interfere with their faith or their culture or their religions. I live in Wisconsin. My job is to make sure that the math is correct. When I was elected king, I only guaranteed one thing, that their contract would be correct. I said, I will not interfere with any subject matter. You put your ideas on paper, I'll make sure it's mathematically certified. And that's as far as I'll go with it. And that's what my promise has been for 15 years. And I've always kept my word to that, to all of you. When I gave the Origines their contracts and the Moris their contracts, I did the same thing. You guys make it better. Build a better mousetrap. And I'll make sure that if you come up with a new idea, even if you write it in adverb verb, I will syntax it and make it correct. And it will read frontwards and backwards, or as many ways as you want to mix up the words, and it will always say the same thing, and then you can vote on it. Everything that becomes contract, accepted by people as a constitution, must be voted on in an open election. Otherwise, the World Court will not sanction the fact that this is a legitimate contract. The opinion of a few have nothing to do with the masses of a national constitution. That has to be voted on by the people. So I put that constitution out there so everyone in the world can read it and find fault with it. And if you can't find fault with it, like I said, if you remove everything that can't be, what is left are the facts. And if the facts are on the table and you agree with them, then vote it in. But always work to make it better, because the world is an ever-changing place.
We can do that, but if a corporation had it wrong, rewrote it in syntax, would all the contracts start from that date, like anything before that? Or would it automatically carry on?
That would be up to the discretion of that corporation. If they're going to write a new syntax contract, they also have the capacity to fix everything else that was built before that. And they will negotiate with all the people that they are working with.
So they could send you a new contract or a new terms and conditions, you sign here. But
Right,
then
but
that's
as long
written
as your product got there and the money flows back and forth, the contract is just a piece of paper to make sure it happens, right? And all thing we're doing is making the paper better so it happens without any discussion, that we don't have to go to court. Because if there's one thing that you would really like to know, is that you've fulfilled the exact letter of the contract, that there's no gray area, nobody can play a trick on you and call you a no person and then go out and steal what you built in life because you're a no person. And every law says no person shall. Well, the government called you all no persons. Which means they want to steal everything. That's why probate court harvests everything with such a high tax rate when you die, 75%. Unless you're smart enough to go ahead and write a contract and take your assets and put it with your children or with somebody or with another corporation or in a trust so it's protected so it can't be taxed. You got to do your homework ahead of time. And if your contract is written in quantum, it can't go into court because it's a fact. And private contract supersedes judicial law. So make sure your private contracts are correct. That's a fact, folks. Private contract supersedes judicial interference by courts. Husband and wife want to get a divorce, sit down at the kitchen table and do it yourself. You don't even need a lawyer. You sign a private contract, it's done. A lawyer can't undo it, a judge can't undo it. They will approve it 72 hours later. It becomes official. You got to wait 6 months in most cases, and you're free. If you hire a lawyer, 2 lawyers will get you to fight until there's nothing left, and then they will settle because there's nothing to divide. Anybody wants a divorce? Divorce contracts are already written in my book. Copy it out of there. If there's kids involved or no kids involved, I got contracts for both. They've already been approved by the courts, and they're free. Can't beat the price. Yeah.
2 questions. Talking about private contracts, joint ventures, for example, in property deals and so on. That applies there too, in terms of you've got a private agreement between 2 people?
Private contract supersedes, but you have to stay within the confinements of real estate laws and transfer quick claim deeds. Got to be careful. Make sure your taxes are taken care of. Transfer fees are paid. Licensing is done. You've done your whatever the due diligence is, because don't forget, you don't actually own that property. You bought a contract that was written in adverb verb, and that land came to the government because they killed the people that lived on it, so it's an alien, A-I-L-I-N-G, alien, which means corruption from the beginning contract. The military is there to make sure that no one interferes with the illusion of contract as long as you're on it. Don't pay your taxes. 90 days later, you don't live there anymore. They'll find somebody else to pay the taxes and sell it at a tax auction. Simple?
Yep, perfect, thank you. And the other question is syntax language, applications to the English language, European language, I heard all that. I heard a multitude of other countries, for example. So has it applied to, say, Asian language and Arabic languages where the formation of sentences is totally different?
When you do the translation on the math, they don't have prepositional phrases also. Even the Hebrew religion doesn't even have vowels. And so when you write things that don't have an English translation, you can't find a word or a meaning for it, you use the English word even though you're writing in all the other languages, you'll put the English words in, and the math will always work the same.
They're not meant to be there.
Huh?
The English word is not meant to be there, but being a language.
That's where the language was created in adverb verb from the beginning. And the math will put the missing words in, and the math will certify that that word does belong there, or the volition of what that word means. Because you can't have two nouns together and say it makes sense, because it's an adjective pronoun. And you have to certify the terms. If you just write in all nouns like the Hebrew languages, you only have adjective pronouns, and therefore you've lost the ability to identify the 1 in 900 accuracy of the sentence. Therefore, it's chaos. And if you have chaos, no one's going to do contract with you. So now they have a vehicle through this technology to fix it. In 1999, no, that was actually 2000, the Chinese government, better known as Walmart, had only 100 stores in America. And then I went to the embassy in New York City, and I gave them the treaty on the math interface on language, allowing them to translate the 10,000 symbols of the Chinese language into English. Took 6 months. Once they had this technology, they could write a quantumized contract for international trade and bring commerce to the United States and back and forth in 6 hours, not 6 months. Now there's 1,800 stores of Walmart in the United States, controlling $1 trillion a year in commerce. So Chinese really like this. It took things from being a complex picture into a mathematical procedure.
Did you get paid by the hour or by percentage? How they ask for percentage?
No, this is a gift. I spent $12,500 of my own pocket money to print the books up and then hand delivered them, including paying my own expenses from A to Z to deliver them to 82 countries and form the treaties.
No appreciation.
And now, oh yeah, because every time somebody touches me, I got 82 countries' ambassadors screaming, "You touched my ambassador." And the amount of commerce that 82 countries can apply pressure to any given country, considering they control 97% of the total wealth of planet Earth, that's a big stick. That's why I'm still standing up here talking to you. I got lots of friends. Got lots of friends. Well, there's other things. Yes.
As you were saying earlier, how all existing adverb-verb contracts will have to be, or will be changed into syntax. What's to stop people as they realise that the original contracts weren't valid, just refusing to accept the new contracts, such as mortgages, credit cards?
I said fiction in, fiction out. It's called volition.
Right.
V-O-L-I-T-I-O-N, volition. The condition of thinking by your own confession is the conduct.
Right.
Now, here's the point. You walk into the bank, and you're going to write a check. Oh, you don't have a pen. Well, okay. So there's a whole jar of pens there. You pick them up, you write it, pull your checkbook out, write your check. You get done with your banking, back and forth, you put your checkbook away, you put your pen in your pocket, and walk out. No problem. Next guy comes in, checks the monitors, got cameras all over the bank, looks at that, looks at the pens, hesitates for a minute, picks one up, goes ahead and does his banking, does his thing. Instead of putting the pen back in the bucket, then asks permission to take it, he checks the monitors to see if anybody's looking and then puts it in his pocket with hesitation, puts his checkbook away and walks out. First guy did his banking. He's innocent because he was doing his business. The second guy just shoplifted a pen. He's guilty of stealing. And a jury will look at the camera because he did this with his eyes and say that man's guilty of body language shoplifting.
80% of conversation is body language.
Yes, exactly. And that body language, there's no words. I mean, the guy could speak Chinese or whatever, and you're in an English bank, and he doesn't know anything from anything. But his body language is going to say he's guilty of he's a thief, he's stealing with volition. And you will be found guilty of volition. And the jury will all come back and prosecute you accordingly.
With volition, I was studying the criminal code the other day, and I've noticed, I think it's section 13, where when someone is persecuted for even the most heinous crimes, the intent of the person at the time when he committed the crime seems to be, according to the code, the major factor in deciding whether he was guilty or not.
That's
Is what
true.
his
That's
intention
correct.
was at the time.
Everything is based on time. What was your volition at the time of the crime?
Right, so all you have to do is admit that
The only thing I have to do is
you didn't think
establish
it
that.
was wrong to do it at the time, and you'd get away with murder.
Well, here's a case. This was a Salt Lake City case where a young girl had a baby, and she was 33 years old, and she had a child, and the grandchild had difficulty and needed a blood transfusion. So the daughter, or the mother of the child, the grandfather came forward to give blood for this child because they had surgery. When they ran the blood thing, it turned out that he was the father. He had raped his daughter when she was 12, which created the child. And it was 20 years later, because of the blood transfusion, that they were able to make a determination that the man was guilty of incest at the age of with a 12-year-old and went to prison for life.
Okay, well that brings me to the...
So it isn't, it's not, their conduct, the conduct of the time and place is against the law in all cultures worldwide for all time. So it doesn't matter when they catch you. There's no statute of limitations for rape or for murder anywhere in the world. You commit a murder in your country, you can go anywhere in the world, you will be extradited back to your country because all courts are the same jurisdiction worldwide, foreign vessels and dry dock, and they all have rules and regulations for murder and rape and specific drug dealings and criminal activities, treason, conspiracies, spying.
I thought Australia used to have the statute of limitation, now you removed it about 50 years ago.
There's no statute of limitations for murder or for rape. You get found guilty and they got physical evidence because of CSI, and they can do that through DNA today, you're going to prison. Question?
One thing you mentioned before about birth certificates when we were born, I've heard, that 45 days after we were born, if there wasn't laid claim to, the government then owned that. And you mentioned also a figure of...
45 days of trust is what it's called, because the trustee has not, the trust was created by the birth certificate that the doctor signed, but the trust expired 45 days later, and then the child, which is an issue of woman, now becomes the issue of the state, and the state takes responsibility that if anything happens to the child, that the Social Security trust that was established expired after 45 days, it's then sold into the state as a commercial instrument, and then the state will take care of the child in the event the mother and the father neglect the child or die in a car accident, and we'll take care of things.
And is that the only use for it, or is it? I've heard that it's on sold by governments as a promissory note.
Right, but you have to put the money into the system so that the money is there for the life of that child, from cradle to grave. Otherwise, there wouldn't be enough dollars in the system to make commerce move, to buy homes, put food on the table, clothing, all the toys that we acquire throughout life. These are all things that are relevant to where did the money come from? Well, it had to be in the system to measure the value of your sweat equity. You give it value as life goes on. If it wasn't there, there wouldn't be enough money for anything. You'd be working for a penny a day rather than being paid $200 or $300 a day to do your job. Right. And fractional banking has to exponentialize itself based on the amount of things. Did you pay for the roads that are out here? I mean, you love running around on the roads. You love all your technology with your cars. You love all your modern conveniences. You want to give them up just because you want to make an argument about what the dollar's worth? It gets things done, doesn't it? And it really makes your life go smooth. You don't want to go from here to Sydney in 4 months because you're in a covered wagon. You want to get there in 8 hours if you want to drive a car, or an hour by plane. You like the toys. And so you don't question how you get there. You
So-
you just want to make sure it's there. And today, technology commands that the world's going to move forward.
Yeah.
Screaming, and doesn't matter. People are not going to give up their toys. Anybody in here want to give up your Blackberries, or your iPods, or your cell phones, or your computers, and go back to watching 3-channel TV in black and white, and be bored out of your tree? Not being able to learn about all the millions of things that are on Wikipedia, and having instant access to anything that you can think of, you can get an answer for today without going down to the library, spending an hour to drive there, look up in the books for months before you find out what's going on. Instead, you just takes 5 seconds and you got it in front of you on a computer screen or on your cell phone. The world is so fast, and our brains want more and more and more. We can comprehend 10,000 thoughts a second. I mean, how fast do you blow through your computer? Your computer 10 years ago was 100 megabytes of memory. And you thought that was all the memory in the world. We paid $100 for another megabyte of memory. Today you get a gigabyte or 10 gigabytes for $20. And our computers are running in the terabyte speeds with 8 gig hard drives. And as fast as we can push the buttons, we can read the screens and download information. And the more we learn, the faster we learn. And it exponentializes itself. And your brain doesn't want to give up that information.
Of course not. We just don't want to pay for it.
There's no such thing as a free lunch. Get over it.
The reason I ask this is because there are a number of people who suggest that originally, because we haven't been informed about that birth certificate situation, that the government has actually committed fraud, and therefore it has utilised the value of the money in that account without our knowledge, so that when we go and borrow money from the bank, we're actually borrowing our own money.
Actually, it isn't your money.
No.
It isn't until you sign over and say you're going to put your life on the line for the next 30 years and pay it back. And don't they give you a contract? You don't care what that contract says. Did you ever read it and syntax it? No. The only thing you want is a roof over your head to take care of your wife and your children. You don't care what that car loan says. You want to be able to get to work without walking in the rain. You want these conveniences, and you're willing to accept the illusion in order to function. And the government will allow you these illusions as long as they get a piece of it called commerce. Taxation. Taxation is you paying the military to guarantee the value of your money. If you don't believe me, walk up to a police officer with a $5 note, put a match to it, and watch how long it takes you to arrest you because you destroyed commerce. That law applies to every postal employee, which controls all military worldwide. And that includes police officers, sheriffs, bailiffs, military personnel. They're all there to guarantee the value of their dollar, so that the commerce between countries flows, your food gets here, the raw resources get here, people got work. Otherwise, if people don't have work and they're starving, they're going to riot. They don't want to riot, so they're going to make sure that the value of the money is guaranteed and that you're going to pay the service fee of the military to guarantee that money.
If you don't sign your tax form in the box,
Who cares?
well, what's the tax?
You can have 100% of nothing or 70% of 100. What do you think is a better deal?
No, what I'm saying is, as an individual, the claim is that if you don't sign in the box, that it's not a contract, and therefore you shouldn't have had to pay tax. That's basically because
Again, you don't have the capacity to guarantee the value of the money. The military does. The military makes sure that the banks pay you your money. The banks, that the storekeeper will honor your money when you take it there to buy your groceries so that you eat today. Otherwise, you'd be dead in 10 days from starvation. It's about guarantees all across the board. There's all different kinds and levels of guarantees. The money guarantees. It's just a vehicle to measure the commerce, to measure your sweat equity. And you don't want to work for nothing. And you don't want the guy that's laying there sleeping, watching TV all day while you're out working, and he says, well, I have a right to everything that you make. Remember the story of the little red hen who plows the field, seeds it, harvests, and the pigs come along and say, you got too much, we want it. That's socialism. You don't like that. If you're going to earn something and build it, you want to acquire your sweat equity. So the government says you'll have your sweat equity in this free economy, but we're going to take a portion of it to guarantee the value of it, and we're going to keep the books on this here, and the money that you pay into taxes will not only take care of the military, paying them to protect you, so that the Chinese don't plant rice in your backyard tomorrow, or anybody else for that fact to trespass. You want those guarantees that the criminal isn't going to bust into your house and hurt you, that the police are going to capture the bad guys, the firemen are going to put out the fire, the ambulance is going to be there when you have a heart attack. You like all those conveniences. And so those services exist in the event there's an emergency. You live on the coast here. Supposing you have a 9.8 earthquake off in New Zealand. You guys are close enough to, can you survive a 200-foot tsunami come crashing into your city here? What do you think the end result of that's going to be? And who's going to pick up the pieces afterwards? It's like watching New Orleans get washed away by a hurricane and see the level of what a disaster is, or that earthquake that took place off of Indonesia, killed 235,000 people because they don't have an infrastructure or any way to protect themselves and didn't have early warning. We like all these toys because it guarantees your condition of life. The world isn't perfect, but they are building more satellites and more early warning systems and trying to make things better. You know what would be the real big disaster? There's a crack in the big island of Hawaii. That volcano on Big Island is 10 miles tall. That crack represents 100 cubic miles of mass. If that falls into the trench 35,000 feet deep, it will produce a 100-foot high tsunami in the entire Pacific Rim. You realize the damage it would do to San Francisco, LA, Tokyo, Singapore, Shanghai, Hong Kong, your cities along Australia here, you'd all be hit with a 100-foot tsunami, and it would be multiple waves of it. What happened in Indonesia? That'd be a drop in the bucket. 1 billion people die if that volcano ever goes pop and knocks that chunk off into the ocean. It's a disaster waiting to happen, and everyone on the planet knows it's there. What do you think would happen if Yellowstone National Park erupted? That's a volcano 40 miles wide and 60 miles long. 2/3 of the United States would be destroyed. The world economy would not exist because of the commerce that would be lost. 60% unemployment on the planet, and about half the population of the planet would die because they couldn't get food, because that's the breadbasket of the world. All because of a single volcano, which erupts every few 100,000 years.
It's gone 5, so let's leave it.
Sure. So what I'm telling you is that there's a lot of things on the planet. We live on an angry planet. We have, the world's trying to do the best they can to guarantee the survival of mankind. Global warming.
There's no global warming, that's fine.
I know, okay.
There's no such thing as global warming.
Have you been monitoring the North Pole
Yeah.
ice cap?
The scientists who don't work for the government have been monitoring it.
In the last 30 years, 40% of the ice pack has shrunk.
No, it hasn't. It's just the way the world actually moves. It's natural form. There's actually more ice around than there.
But when the permafrost comes out, the methane that's been trapped for 50,000 years has been released, and methane is 50 times more potent than carbon.
There's no toxins. Speak to Lord Monkton. Lord Monkton.
Yeah, there's a lot of research.
He's just conducting a huge seminar in
From a
Australia.
lot of scientists.
You've seen all over the TV in Australia.
I've heard both sides. Okay, there's arguments on both sides about global warming and no global warming, okay? And that's a subject matter, okay? And that's outside the jurisdiction of the syntax of the seminar. We can debate, just like you can debate religions, you can debate politics, you can debate global warming political issues, but that has nothing to do with, that's a science issue versus communications. I don't know the truth, one way or the other. I've researched both of them, and both sides have valid arguments. And so the only thing we can do is wait and see what happens. Yes.
you talk about a free economy. I'm not sure how free the economy is, and I'm certainly not comfortable with the military guaranteeing my dollar and holding me to sweat equity for the rest of my life to validate the dollar. I guess I wanted to talk about volition. You talk about the volition of contract, whether it's in fiction or it's in truth. The volition is probably the most important thing. So if the case is that the central banks lend money to the governments and the central banks are privately owned, and then the banks collude with these central banks to then, through fractional reserve lending, enslave everybody, what's the volition of their contract?
Well, they made it available to you and you accepted it. You didn't go out there and say, you didn't go to the bank and say, I'm going to syntax your mortgage contract. They said, who's got the money to buy the house? And they said, well, you got to go to the bank or credit union. You can go to private individuals, but private individuals don't, unless they're a family member, probably wouldn't give you any money. So if you want the money, you got to play the game to get the house, so you got a roof over your head and support your family. And if you would have taken the time, you could have wrote your own contract in syntax first and took it to the bank and said, will you accept this? Because it's correct.
But isn't the volition of the lender incorrect if they're stating that they have risk, but they make digits out of nothing? So what's their risk?
Does the lender have an education to understand quantum language? Did he take this course, or does he even understand the fact that there is syntax available to him? The answer is, if you walk into the bank and ask any bank teller or bank president, do you understand what the word syntax means? They're going to go, no. You look at his eyes. Some people are absolutely surprised when they hear the word syntax. They go, I don't even know what that means. And they really are starstruck. Define it for me. And then you start showing them little pieces of information, and all of a sudden like they go, oh, we got a problem. And then they get scared. Am I going to lose my job if I ruffle the feathers of the other people who don't understand the syntax? Because remember what I told you? First rule of business is, don't hire your replacement. Nobody wants to lose their job. When I got arrested in New Zealand last week, the immigration officer, after I syntaxed his immigration form, says, I'm paid to do that. I'm paid to lie to you. And I don't want to lose my job because unemployment is 12% in New Zealand. So what's the guy saying to you? He's going to break the law just to keep his job. And that's what we're dealing with all over the world.
Somewhere the lie's got to stop, and the true volition has to come in because the world's enslaved.
That's why I'm doing these seminars. You've got to educate enough people so that you can vote correctness in. As long as people don't know, they won't change. You didn't know for 8,500 years, and 8,500 years nobody changed. The only thing that people do is they go to war with each other. You know, Odell said to me once, Odell was a chief judge's clerk. She says, people are angry. People who are angry file lawsuits. Business is good. I have job security. Yes.
It's on the same subject, just a different facet of it. I want to confirm what I hear you saying is that if people sign an agreement that is not made in quantum language, but it's in
Volition.
By their own volition, verb, adverb, regardless of whether the word, and they both assume they understand what each other are discussing and they've agreed on that contract, whether it be a house contract or buying a car or even on a constitution. Because they voted on it, does that make it binding?
Yes, because both of you signed it.
So what you're saying, our constitution...
They offered, you accepted, and you're both going to comply with it, and if you don't, where are you going to go? You're going to go into an adverb-verb court that's going to enforce the adverb-verb law.
So what you're saying, our constitution that we voted in 1900, regardless of whether it's written in quantum language or not, is binding.
Well, it was binding until I rewrote it. Now people can stand up with the correct one and say, how come you guys didn't follow your own syntax that you wrote in your own styles manual, and you went out there and you broke the law for the last 100 years? Why don't you know how to read and write? Why are you claiming that you know how to read and write, taking a paycheck for it, but you actually don't know how to read and write?
But nobody's voted the one that you rewrote. Therefore, the parties have not agreed on it.
People are still looking at it. It hasn't gone to the referendum. In other words, government has to stand up and say, we have a new constitution here. On Tuesday, in 90 days from now, we are going to vote on it. Do you want to stay with the old one, adverb, verb, or do you want to accept a new one? If you accept a new one, we're going to have to change contracts.
So,
And it's through the education of people. That's why I have my website up for 10 years. That's why I write these books and tapes, so that we're trying to educate as many people as possible so we get the controlling vote globally to fix it. Eventually, it's got to get fixed. You can't lie to everybody. You can fool some of the people some of the time, most of the people all the time, but not all of the people all the time. And at some point, you're going to wake up